Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Here we are, January the 8th already of 2024. Wow. Anyway, hope your new year is starting up really, really good. Uh, you know, Saturday was just a pretty cool day for me. Uh, as you know, I'm a car guy. I'm a gearhead, and I've got a '64 Ford Fairlane Sport Coupe that I had run into several stumps. Seemed like I run into more and more stumps the older I get. But anyway, I managed to get over one of my stumps and get something accomplished on it. And I was just like, yeah, yeah. I was so pleased. And then I've got a '67 Mustang that I recently bought, and I ran into a stump. Had the carburetor rebuilt, and the carburetor is leaking like a sieve. We've had it all four times, off of the motor four times, and the bowls leaked, the metering block leaked, the accelerator pump leaked. We finally got the bowls to stop leaking because we bought a better gasket set. But evidently, my accelerator pump, the plate itself, is bad because it's leaking, from the little arm, from the little center pivot point. One stump after another. But that's what makes the hobby fun, right? Okay, into the text. We are continuing our summary and concluding our study of the Olivet Discourse. And yes, we are going to get into the study of the feast days when we're done. All right? Over the last couple of weeks, I've been sharing with you this subject of the wedding in Matthew chapter 25, 1 to 13. Listen, folks, this is an astoundingly important subject, just like the subject of the feast days is an astoundingly important subject. And by the way, I'm currently writing an article. It's about 24 pages long right now on another subject that I've been studying it literally for years on and off, but just lately I've been focusing on it, and it literally blows me away. And that's the subject of the shame versus glory motif. It was a way of thinking in the ancient world. It's still a way of thinking in the Near East. And in the article, I'll fully explain it. But I had not realized before how dominantly this subject of shame versus glory is related to the subject of eschatology. And in my research, I am just staggered at the interconnection between this thought process of shame versus glory is to the entire subject of eschatology. Just like the feast days permeate both the Old and the New Testament, the shame versus glory motif permeates both the Tanakh and the New Testament in direct or in contexts that are directly related to eschatology. It's incredible. So forgive me for taking a little bit of a moment here to share some of what I'm seeing that is so incredibly important. Okay, so the wedding. I've shared with you how the wedding was one of Jesus's very favorite subjects. The wedding was a topic of the Old Testament, how God was married to Israel. Because of her spiritual adultery, he divorced her, Hosea chapter 2. But he promised that in the last days, he would remarry her. He also promised that in the last days, Judah would become adulterous just like her, even worse than the 10 tribes, and that Judah would have a harvest just like Israel. Well, what was the harvest of Israel? Divorce and death. That's what God did to Judah. We find that throughout the New Testament. And so, as promised last week, we come to the book of Revelation and the subject of the wedding. Now, in my earlier and more extensive discussion of the wedding, I focused a lot on 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, because 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 really honestly is the coming of Christ for the wedding. It's Matthew chapter 25, 1 to 13. And I don't know of a lot of people that disagree with that. Some, but not a whole lot. But I've written this book entitled, We Shall Meet Him in the Air, the Wedding of the King of Kings, which is the most extensive, and so far as I know, the only full preterist commentary on 1 Thessalonians 4, 13 to 18. Now, for the month of January 2024, U.S. orders only, you can get this book, which normally sells for $23.95 plus shipping, plus leaving the rapture behind. Because you see, my dispensational friends say that 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 is all about the rapture. Well, no, it's not. And so, again, during the month of January 2024, U.S. orders only, all right? Get both books delivered to your door for $25. Now, again, this is normally $23.95 plus $8.95 shipping, which is the flat rate. I'm going to try to reduce that. This would be $3.95 plus postage. So you can see that you're going to save a serious amount of money. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com, beautiful banner right up at the very top. Click it, purchase these two books, and you'll be glad you did. You're going to save a bundle. You're going to save about $12 at least. Okay, now then. So what I want to do today is close out our discussion of the wedding. We've looked at Matthew chapter 22, looked at Matthew chapter 25, 1 to 13, which of course leads us into Revelation. And look, the wedding is found throughout the New Testament because, as I said, the wedding is one of Jesus's favorite subjects, because the wedding was to be the fulfillment of God's Old Covenant promises made to Old Covenant Israel. And the wedding, please catch the power of this, the wedding was to be the resurrection, the time of the resurrection. Well, in the book of Revelation, we have the discussion of this harlot city called Babylon. You know, I constantly read, whatever, people say, well, it may be sort of kind of possible that Babylon of Revelation was Old Covenant Jerusalem, but she represented something greater than that. Where do you find that in the text? It's not there. Period. End of story. Just this morning, I'm filming this on Sunday morning, in correspondence with an individual, he said, I'm not so sure, but what Jerusalem may represent Babylon, but I'm not so sure it doesn't represent something greater than Jerusalem. Well, here's the problem. Babylon killed the Old Covenant prophets, Revelation 16:6. Babylon is, quote, where the Lord was crucified, unquote, Revelation 11:8. Babylon is the city that killed the apostles and prophets of Jesus, Revelation 18:20 to 24. Babylon is the city whose blood guilt for doing all of those bloody sins was full when John wrote. And Babylon is the city whose destruction at the coming of the Lord was imminent when John wrote. So I challenged this individual in correspondence, show me another city guilty of doing those things. Show me. He won't, because he can't. No other city did those things. So Babylon is clearly first century Jerusalem. It was Jerusalem that Jesus called, and Judea, of course, the Jews of his day, a wicked and adulterous generation. Why did he do that? because he was echoing the story of Israel, the 10 northern tribes, married to Yahweh, but committed spiritual adultery. By going off into adultery, by violating Torah, she became an adulterous wife. Now, here is Jesus speaking of the Jews of his day, calling them, the adulterous generation. Someone else pointed out to me, well, that doesn't carry any weight because the Jews for centuries prior to that had been adulterous. Yes, that doesn't negate the point at all. It's still Judah and Jerusalem. She was adulterous in the book of Malachi. It doesn't change the fact of Revelation. You say that's one of those argumentum ad desperatum arguments. Yeah, the Jews were unfaithful before the first century. Therefore, Jesus calling them the adulterous generation doesn't really mean anything. Well, yes, it does, because Jesus said his generation was the worst generation of all. Matthew chapter 12, 43 to 45. So, what would happen, what does happen in the book of Revelation? This adulterous wife, who had been in a persecutorial partnership with the beast to persecute the saints. The beast, which is not Babylon, the beast would turn on this woman, hate her, stone her, and burn her. Revelation chapter 17, 10 and following. As has been pointed out by many, many commentators, that punishment there is for the wife of a priest who had become unfaithful, broken the marriage covenant. So what was happened to her? She was to be stoned and burnt with fire. And at that destruction, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to pay very close attention. This is directly parallel to Matthew chapter 22. What happened in Matthew 22? A certain king made a great wedding feast for his son. I discuss this extensively in my book. We shall meet him in the air, the wedding of the King of Kings. This king made a great wedding feast for his son, sent out his servants to call those who had been invited. And as they went, those who had been invited began to make excuse, but they began to mistreat those servants and to kill them, to persecute them. The king of the wedding was angry, and he sent out his army to destroy those wicked people. Okay? What city was invited to the wedding? Well, let's see. Isaiah chapter 62. God said, although Jerusalem had been forsaken, divorced, the time was coming in which, at the coming of the Lord, Isaiah 62, 10 to 12, behold, your salvation is coming, and his reward is with him. At the coming of the Lord said, you will no longer be called forsaken, but you shall be called, and he says, as a young man rejoices over his bride, so I will rejoice over you, O Zion. For as a young man rejoices over his bride, right? Got that? And you shall no longer be called forsaken. You shall be called Hephzibah. You shall be called Beulah, which means married. What's he talking about? Jerusalem? Watch this and catch the power of this. In Matthew 16, 27 and 28, Jesus said, the Son of Man will come in the glory of the Father with his angels and shall reward every man according to his works. Folks, Greg Beale notices it. Other commentators notice it. Jesus is directly echoing Isaiah chapter 40, 10 to 12. Behold, your salvation is coming, and his reward is with him. His arms shall bring salvation. A direct echo of Isaiah 62, 10 to 12. Your salvation is coming. His reward is with him. This is the promise of the wedding. When would it be? At the coming of the Lord. When did Jesus say it would be? Verily I say unto you, there are some standing here which shall not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. What's the coming in the kingdom? It's the wedding. Yeah. So in Revelation chapter 19, we find the destruction of those that had killed the prophets sent to them, that had slain the Son sent to them, that had slain the apostles and prophets sent to them. They had filled up the measure of their sin, Revelation 17:6. And the Lord was coming with a great sword coming out of his mouth. He was coming as the King of Kings and as the Lord of Lords. He was coming for salvation, Revelation 19, verse 1. To avenge the blood of his saints, Revelation 19, 1 and 2. And he was coming, Revelation 19, 6. Let us be glad and rejoice, for the time of the wedding has come. Is that a different wedding from Matthew 25, the coming of the bridegroom for his bride? No. Is it a different wedding from Matthew chapter 22? No. Is it a different wedding feast than that in Luke chapter 14 and following? No. It is one wedding at the coming of the Lord in the judgment of the harlot bride, the adulterous wife of Old Covenant Judah. It is empirically true, Judah was destroyed in AD 70. And that was the coming of the Lord to destroy the Old Covenant adulterous wife and to remarry the righteous remnant, those of the Old Covenant bride who had repented and turned to Jesus, her husband. And they had been betrothed to her. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, 2 Corinthians chapter 12, I'm jealous over you with a godly jealousy, for I have espoused you as a chaste virgin unto Christ. I'm out of time for today. Thank you so much for joining me. Tomorrow, we will get to the parable of the absent master by way of recapitulation and refresher. I'll see you on the flip side.